The archetype of good versus evil is something that plays out in all forms of fiction. And of course, G.I. Joe was no exception to this rule, and if anything, they demonstrated good versus evil as good, if not better, than anyone. Now, what happens when you get a faction within a faction? Does it make things more exciting? Does it dilute the brand? Well, I know I have my opinions and thoughts on that, but I'd like to hear what some of our guests here think today, as well as what people in the chat think and how they feel about this particular topic in general. And with that, once again, hi everyone, my name's Ken, and this is a Toy Connections online live stream, or TKO, broadcasting to you whatever part of the day it is and whatever part of the world you happen to be. So this is a slightly abbreviated 1 hour stream of TKO just because I got some errands to do after this, but I am joined by two individuals who just couldn't wait to get on because they're passionate about all things G.I. Joe. Now this other person, it's his first time officially on this channel, even though I've been on his and we've been on guests on other channels together. He's always on social media. He's anywhere and everywhere all at the same time. In fact, he's probably streaming again sometime later today. And he streamed just last night on Jay Bartlett's channel. So, Articulated Chad, welcome to TKO, my friend. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing, Ken?
Great. We just love that setup behind you, the ambient lighting, the Joes on top of Joes on top of Joes. It's just, yeah. It's just, if there was ever a G.I. Joe's and also / Action Force toy room, you've got it, bud.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. And of course the Takara G.I. Joe shirt.
Yeah, absolutely. I gotta represent Japanese G.I. Joe today.
Yeah, well, it's a bit underrated, right? Like people kind of forget that Takara made Joes as well. So
yep, sure did. They actually had an individually carded Zartan, which is rare. So
yes, because it wasn't just with a swamp skier, I guess is what you're saying. So
right, on a single card.
Yeah, and broadcasting to us from the future, even though I know this joke was played out yesterday on Jay's channel, but it'll never get old there or here. I just know I can't coin the phrase because it's already been claimed. But this individual, we stream all the time together, although not as much lately. Just timing hasn't quite worked out super well. But he's managed to get up at the wee hours of the morning, all the way from Australia, where it's already Sunday. We've got Zazel from Sergeant Slaughterhouse.
Good morning. It is 3:30 a.m. here. At about 2 o'clock a.m., I said to myself, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to have a power nap, and I'm going to have a 1 hour power nap, and then I'll wake up fresh and energized and ready to go. And let me tell you, it didn't work at all. I'm tired.
I'll tell you what would have happened if I had tried to power nap this morning. I would have woken up. There would have been a whole bunch of messages on my phone saying TKO is late and hasn't gone live yet. I'd scramble. Zazel would already say screw this guy and go to bed. Chad would have already started his daily errands, and I'd be out here apologizing to the crowd. So that's probably how it would have gone. So that's why I don't power nap on. I can't control.
Feeding myself coffee. I mean, I never used to look this good, but yeah.
It's working. Whatever you're doing, buddy, it's working.
Cut yourself some slack.
I couldn't get any more slack, mate. Let's get into it.
Let's get into it. Yeah, well, before we do that, let's say a quick hello to the chat. And we got Jim Largo reminding us, hail Cobra. Hail Cobra, hail Hydra, hail whatever. Hail all the bad guys. And the Decepticons too. Because, bit of a Transformer guy. All right, we got Action Figure Archive. A good point here about Cobra as a multi-faction organization makes the most sense, and each having their own evil agenda, and that's why they're coming together. We got a certain somebody here pulling double duty, so thank you for making me, just in case nobody else showed up, I could have pulled up this chat and made it look like there was people watching. So, yes, we got Payne's Toy Samples greeting everybody. We got Gazz, one of the channel members as well, saying hello to everybody. We always got to give him the Megaforce salute. Jeff Morris, always good to see you. Dale Santaford and Matthew Comstock, as well as Ryan Sweeney, no stranger to TKO Live. And I think we're almost caught up in the chat. Yeah, we're basically caught up in the chat. So, all right. I know a few people tend to file in a bit later on and apologize for being late. And I'm like, you know what? I'm late to everyone else's live stream as well. So, TJC also broadcasting from the future, but I don't think it's quite the next day for him. I think it's just the evening for him. So, yeah, it does seem like ages since the last stream, even though it was only 6 days. But, it it's good to be live again. Let's put it that way, right? Say that like I've been on hiatus. It's fun. Like Chad's always live. You know, he's very selfless. He's on everybody else's channel. And spoiler alert, Chad and I have done a collaboration on History of G.I. Joe 1982 that will air sometime in the month of November. He brought all his articulated Chad charisma. And even though I gave him scripted lines, he still added a few great nuggets of information where I'm like, I'm going to keep that in there. And the way he recorded it, he read out the scripted lines, then added his nugget at the end in case I know how Chad thinks. And he's like, okay, if you want to chop this off, Ken, go ahead. I'm like, no, I'm going to keep it in. I'm going to keep it in because it's good information.
Did you like the sonic boom though?
Okay, that only made it onto the outtakes that I'll show the patrons.
Yeah,
that didn't make it into the final cut, but it will be in the outtakes.
So Zazel, I was recording some of the lines that Ken had sent me, you know, and so I'm actually reading from the script, and I'm off camera, and I'm reading the script, and you hear this boom in the background, and I was like, and there's a sonic boom, because I live on a fighter base, right?
Oh, yeah,
it's always
that's
sonic
right.
booms
You do. I always forget that. Yeah, because I uploaded just your portion onto my backup channel where I give the patrons access, so they will see the sonic boom. The 13 or so patrons I have will see your sonic boom. Yeah, and yes, because it's always wrestling time, right? Owen Hart, who said nugget? I am not a nugget. So, gentlemen, with regard to the sub teams, I just wanted to start off by asking, and well, first by making a statement, then asking. Look, G.I. Joe was already a big brand before the sub-team idea came along. Now, I know it was a couple years in and the Dreadnoks came in, and we can consider them a sub-team of sorts as well, but they sort of just fit. They weren't color-coded like the other sub-teams, so they just felt like regular Cobra. Did you find the enemy sub-teams a good thing for the evil faction, or did you find that it distracted or diluted from what already existed there? Chad, let's go with you to begin with.
I guess it depends on how you kind of want to skin that. So I personally consider the Crimson Guard to be a sub-team in itself, because, you know, Extensive Enterprises completely bankrolls the Crimson Guard. So even though they are kind of a ceremonial guard in the Cobra ranks, they answer to Tomax and Zaymot. And in the history of G.I. Joe, when G.I. Joe was going to continue with later Sunbow seasons before it went to Deke, they were going to do the Coil, and the Coil was going to be ran by Tomax and Zaymot.
Oh, not Serpentor. Right? I didn't know that.
No, Tomax and Zaymot. So it's kind of more of a 6 in one hand, half dozen in another sort of thing. So I consider Crimson Guard definitely a sub-team.
And I did not think of that before the stream started.
And I think that the sub teams are good. They all play a role. Even when you look at Cesspool and like the Cobra side of the Eco Warriors, it's a good balance. So I think they're good. And then also, if you really want to get into the weeds, my friends, so Overlord and the Bats, you could really call them a sub team as well, because Overlord, he's the Battle Android Trooper commander, so he's in charge of all of them.
Glad I brought you onto the stream.
The Night Creeper and the Night Creeper leader.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, the Night Creepers. Yep.
And somebody on Facebook mentioned the Night Vipers as well, and I didn't respond to that because of the same reason, the same line of thinking. I'm going to comment about the Crimson Guard right now. I simply thought of them as just a straight up army builder. And yes, there's Crimson Guard Immortal and Commander who are like higher ranking, but like if you look what Classified's doing right now by adding a Crimson Bat, I see what you're saying, because it's like a Crimson faction under Extensive Enterprises. It's not just the way it was in the Sunbow cartoon, where it's Tomax and Zaymot, Crimson Guards. There's Immortals, Commanders, and now Bats, and they're going to keep expanding that. And I never thought about that. Right?
What about the Iron Grenadiers? So
definitely
Iron Grenadiers. So Destro, like he's just an arms dealer. Right. So he's really just like, he's Cobra's supplier. He doesn't work for Cobra, just like the Dreadnoks don't work for Cobra. They work with Cobra, right? They're mercenaries. He pays them.
Yes.
So Destro gets tired of Cobra Commanders, ish, which I don't know how much we swear on your channel. I just try to always be respectful. So Destro gets tired of him, right? And he creates his own faction, and he pretty much takes over. Like he kind of wipes Cobra out.
That's just it. Because like when I got into G.I. Joe, it was largely during the sub team era, just because of the year I was born. It was all about Tiger Force and Iron Grenadiers. And Iron Grenadiers were very much marketed as a sub team rather than like an optional like external faction for Cobra, which is very different from how the Crimson Guard was marketed until you mentioned it before. Like, you can't just look at how it was marketed then. What about the retroactive lens and what G.I. Joe has done with it since?
Yeah, broader picture.
But Zazel, what do you think? Did they add a lot, or did you find it diluted what was already good about G.I. Joe?
Well, it depends on how you break down what a sub team is. I would consider the Iron Grenadiers just a completely different faction and not a sub team. The Dreadnoks, again, not a sub team, just a whole different faction outside of Cobra. I didn't ever think that the Dreadnoks were a part of Cobra. They definitely don't look like Cobra. They were always its own thing, but as far as sub teams are concerned, you can say without a shadow of doubt that you have Python Patrol. That's definitely a sub team for within Cobra. Other than that, you've got. I mean, I wouldn't even say that the Eco. What was the Eco ones for the?
The Eco War. The Eco. They were just the bad guy Eco Warriors, weren't they? The Cobra. Yeah.
Well, I guess
they were and his bad guys.
Yeah. I mean, I guess they were in allegiance with Cobra, so I guess you can add that as a specific Cobra sub team. But I'm on board with Chad saying that the if Xamot and Tamox, if Xamot and Tomax decided that they didn't want the Iron Grenadiers to be a part of Cobra, they'd pull them all out. They're like, nope, we're out, doing our own thing. But I think that they add value because they add a certain new element to your playtime. Right now, all of a sudden, you don't just have Joes versus Cobra. You've got a whole different thing going on the side here that can spin it either way, depending on your imagination. So, yeah.
And that's very different, I guess, from like how Python Patrol was very much obviously just specialized Cobra,
right.
Troop builders who became a sub team. Okay, I see where you folks went with it. There's the conglomerate of Cobra, which is Cobra Commander, and he sort of employed the Dreadnoks. He's employed Extensive Enterprises, and he's employed Destro. What those various branches do is up to them, and how they evolve. They're not necessarily sub teams. They're a subcontractor to Cobra. When the money stops flowing, see you later, Cobra Commander. You're on your own, as opposed to Python Patrol, which clearly Cobra Commander owns.
And the description of Cobra clearly states it, right? A ruthless criminal organization determined to rule the world, right? They're an organization. They're like a loose conglomeration of enemy teams, right? So Dreadnoks are mercenaries. Even when you look at like Zartan, it's just like Zartan the enemy. It's like Destro the enemy. So they're kind of like I sort of view it like the Department of Defense, right? So you have like the Department of the Navy, the Air Force, the Army, the Marines, and like the Army does something totally different than the Navy, and so on and so forth, right? But they're all like one team, one fight, kind of everybody under the Cobra organization umbrella, but they're doing their own thing.
Well, some of the
Python Patrol for sure is a sub team.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the early animation and the theme songs for the commercials would say. Going up against Cobra and Destro.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then they changed it to Cobra the enemy. Yeah.
You're right. It's Cobra and Destro, as if he's not really part of Cobra. He's an affiliate. Yeah. So I see.
The Mass Device, the very first episode of the 5-parter, it's G.I. Joe against Cobra and Destro.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
You know what? And this is kind of like I'm not saying I set expectations going into the stream, but simply hearing these points of view have really kind of opened up my mind, because I've always kind of looked at Cobra as the umbrella organization, which I guess they are, but they may not be as unified. And I'm reminded of a scene right now in the Devil's Due comic run, which many of you know I'm a huge fan of the Devil's Due comic run. Even told Brandon Jerwall myself how much I loved his writing on it. There's a very specific part where Cobra's fighting with the Coil, who was Serpentor's rogue faction at the time. Again, was it a sub team, or is it like his version of the Iron Grenadiers? Seems like the Coil was Serpentor's other faction. And Zartan gets in a fight with a mystery man in a mask, and he stabs him through the gut. And when he pulls off the mask, it turns out that it's Zartan. And it's kind of like, no, that scene. And he has to carry Zartan out, and he gets on the radio, Dreadnoks, we're pulling out. And he basically pulls the Dreadnoks off the battlefield because he has absolute say over them. And it's not like Cobra Commander can override him on the communicator and go, everybody stay. I'm overruling your squad leader. He's not a squad leader. He's the commander of, and they're set up very differently from G.I. Joe. So
you see that all the time with the Dreadnoks, even in the 87 animated movie, right? So Pythona's telling everybody what they're going to do, and the Dreadnoks are like, we don't got to listen to you, right?
Mhm.
And then she pulls out that gem, and that's when Zartan gives that line. A gem of that size answers all our questions.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
You're right.
Divide that,
They'll just split.
Yeah.
Right. And so, you know what? I mean, I'm not sure if IDW ever visited this this concept or not. Maybe they did in Cobra Civil War, but like if the factions all went into a fight against each other, how that would turn out. Maybe it's already been visited, because my GI Joe knowledge is limited to the beginning of Hama's run, a few miniseries in IDW, and basically the entirety of Devil's Due's run, just because of the availability period that I was reading comics at the time. But I know some of these people in the chat have read the IDW stuff and could probably tell us, was there an internal fighting where the factions all chose sides and it wasn't all just under Cobra Commander, right? I imagine that's what Cobra Civil War was about, just by the title. I don't know if you read it or not, Chad.
Yeah, so I'm still trying to catch up. Ken, are you up to speed on Serpentor? What is it, Serpentor Con?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah.
Do tell.
Just I don't know. I'm not caught up. So I was looking at some panels from issue 299, and I'm like, oh, so it's Serpentor with a beard and long hair, and they call him Serpentor Con. I'm like, okay, whatever.
Like Wrath of
I'm
Khan?
all for that design choice. Yeah.
Well, we could see another classified figure in that in that style, maybe. I'm not sure. Hey, if Transformers can pull characters directly out of the comics, so can GI Joe.
they should have been doing that all the time. Like, I'm waiting on a female Crimson Guard leader. So,
oh, there we go. Here's our first review of it. But Ryan Sweeney also tells me AEW is bad most of the time. So who knows?
the Serpentor
I don't
Con
listen to him.
is weird.
If we're not going to argue semantics about what is or isn't a Cobra sub team, I will say that the Dreadnoks are probably the most iconic and the most visually striking of all of the sub teams. I mean, you've got the Crimson Guards in their own right, fantastic looking. The Bats, fantastic looking figures. But as a whole, the Dreadnoks, you line them up, and while they look all like a mishmash of eclectic characters, they just fit so well together. Probably better to get together than the sum of their parts.
For sure. And when I put together my top 7 sub teams video of all time near the start of the channel about a year and a half ago, I didn't stop to think about what counts as a sub team versus what doesn't. I just went with okay, on yojo.com, they'll tell you sub teams, they'll put up a list. Okay, well, I guess that's a sub team. But everybody's headcanon is different. And depending on who's running the official canon is also different, right? Like how Sunbow treats it would be different from how Deke treats it, which would be different from how Marvel, IDW, Devil's Due, and whoever takes over the G.I. Joe comics going forward, because I know that deal expiring relatively soon.
I will say just real quickly, because of Ryan's comment about Serpentor Khan, I'll just say that my favorite iteration of anyone wearing the Serpentor armor has got to be this guy.
The version 3.
Well, that, and he's...
Or the 2005. Or the Macho Monkey Wrench. What am I thinking? Macho King Cobra.
King Cobra.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I have mental illness. He definitely does.
Hey, freak show!
Dig it.
I love it.
Cream rises to the top, right? So.
What about Red Shadows? I mean, technically, if you want to go off the Action Force, they are they're a predecessor of Cobra.
Yes.
What?
Yeah.
In my head canon and in my collection, Red Shadows they're a sub team of Cobra.
Yep, I agree.
Because they belong, they fit.
I think IDW treats it that way. I think. I know Devil's Due. They had the Red Shadows as like a background organization.
Yeah, they were
who kind of showed up and usurped, the military command, because the Jugglers were this ruling general group cabal who controlled everything from the background, and the Red Shadows had them all killed. But that Red Shadows was executed very differently from the Baron Ironblood and Black Major themed ones. Yeah, there we go. I've actually got to read. I've got to reread some of those issues. Actually, I got some of them behind me right now. And we got some good questions here. Is Cobra Law a sub team? They're more like the religious organization behind.
I would say that Cobra is the sub team of Cobra Law.
It's the
if
same
anything.
thing with Red Shadows. So if Baron Ironblood like rebranded himself as Cobra Commander in the Action Force world, they're a predecessor. Cobra Law would be a predecessor, right?
Right.
Because Cobra Commander was set loose upon the world of man by Cobra Law.
Well, there you go. Right. We got Headman and the Headhunters potentially as well. But it seemed like in the Deke run, Headman was kind of like the main bad guy that unified Cobra and G.I. Joe to go against him. Right.
True. But I'd consider Headman and the Headhunters to be a more organized version of the Dreadnoks.
Yes.
Right. They're Dreadnoks for the in suits and ties, basically.
And I consider Cold Slither a sub of a sub team, basically. Yeah. a sub team in disguise. Yeah, we got all the GI Joe fans making it into the chat right now. Everyone's really excited in the chat, so I think we picked the right topic to talk about here, gentlemen.
Very cool.
So we all played with GI Joes to varying degrees. All our mileage varies at how we did it as a kid. Other than the Dreadnoks, other sub teams didn't make it into the Sunbow cartoon. Yes, Python Patrol was briefly in Deke. Destro showed up in his Iron Grenadier colors. But in your own headcanon and your background, your backyard adventures, when you were playing G.I. Joe as a kid, were you more likely to stick with the Sunbow and Marvel style, or were you more likely to incorporate sub teams? I guess that depends what year it is. But Chad, let's go with you. How did your headcanon work as a kid?
So when I was a kid, it was all just good versus evil.
Okay.
It didn't really matter. I wasn't like, I mean, I'm sure a couple of times I'd be like, oh, and here comes Scrap Iron over here, and he's doing his shady Scrap Iron stuff, which is, that's kind of influence from the Sunbow stuff.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it was just good guys versus bad guys, and it didn't matter who it was.
Fair enough.
Now, as an adult who doesn't play with my toys, then
play them in factions.
Trust me, I play with them. I don't give a hell. I'll play with my toys. So, I have the 40 years of history on top of that, and so I will, echelons and sub teams and all that stuff.
Fair enough. And you're also a soldier yourself by trade, right? So, how you play right now is you just go outside and play with the real guns, I guess. So,
yeah, I do a lot of that.
Zazel, I will point out some of the welcome to the slaughter. Sorry, I always do that. Slaughterhouse Wrestling Championship footage behind you there.
Yeah.
So before I forget, we should plug that episode at some. Why don't you do it right now? Why don't you plug that right now, and then I'll let you weigh in on your headcanon in a bit.
Playing behind me at the moment is the Taurus versus Blanca match from the Wrestling Championship. But the idea today was basically I was going to watch the Slaughterhouse Wrestling Championship, which is basically Sarge going around and recruiting wrestlers to be a part of his wrestling championship to see who's the best of the best. And I'm currently filming the Hitman versus the Mountie with Ryan Sweeney as the Mountie and Ken as the Hitman. But it's been I think it's been 6 months since I did the last one. There are 4 currently out now. If you want to go check it out, this last one's taken me 6 months to do because I decided that I'm only going to film stuff when I feel like it, so it's fun and not push myself to do something that I don't think is fun. But yeah, these are definitely fun to watch if you want to check it out. Ryan's comment saying created my own sub team. Yeah, I did that too. Mostly because where I grew up, when I was a kid, I was living in the Northern Territory, and there isn't a lot of options there. So you might only see 1 or 2 characters from any given sub team, and then you're at the whim of whatever you can afford and whatever is available to you. So often you would pick, your 5 favorite Joes or your 5 favorite Cobra, and they would be like, its own sub team or its own little squad, and those would be your guys. They'd be your go-to guys. So yeah, I'd play the same way, Ryan. But check out Ryan soon as the Mountie and Ken.
We had already established that you did have a lot of sticks, though.
Oh, heaps of sticks. Oh yeah. You couldn't find a bad stick. Like if you found a good stick, you kept that stick. You'd pick it up. You'd show your friends how cool that stick was. And I'm not even joking.
That's a
if you
good
found
stick.
a good stick, you kept it. Yeah, good stuff. Some rocks too. Plenty of rocks. Oh, great stuff.
So I guess that answers the question about your headcanon and how you played as a kid's days. So basically, if it was fun, you did it, regardless of whether it was.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, there's some good comments in there about making your own sub teams, and I didn't realize until right now that I did actually do the same thing for the good guys, and it's because I feel one of the underrated vehicle/makeshift bases in GI Joe was Fort America in the early 1990s. And I would kind of have this roaming Fort America crew who consisted of, Gung Ho, Roadblock, General Flag for some reason. And they were just always stuck on my Fort America. And I always played with them as such. And I guess in hindsight, that was kind of a sub team, kind of a roaming sub team in Fort America. Right now in Canada here.
So I saw a comment about Battle Force 2000. If you only had one of those characters, would you bother saying that they're Battle Force 2000, or would you just say it's G.I. Joe?
It was just part of
Battle Person 2000.
Battle Person,
Battle Person 2000.
Whenever that happened to me, I would just do a scene in my mobile command center where he would just be repping the team, take the orders, and take it back to the team to run, and then I would just never play that scene in my living room. Right.
See, I think that I have a different perspective, and it's cool, right? Because we all have our own ideas of how we play and what we play with and things like that. What brings us joy.
Right.
But G.I. Joe, right? It's that whole global initiative, joint operation thing.
Right.
It's all going to be based on what we call MET-TC, right? So you have your mission, you have your environment, you have your troops, your time, and all those considerations that determines who goes on what mission. Right. It's the same thing with G.I. Joe as it is with the Department of Defense, because that's what it's based on. So a sub team in G.I. Joe, like if it's a squad of people or a fire team of people or even a platoon, like to me, it was always just they're Joes.
Yeah.
Like I don't know what it was. Like something about Joe. I never really saw the sub teams, even though they were marketed as that, because they were always about like teams and groups. Especially toward the later run of A Real American Hero, it's all about teams and groups. And to me, I always just saw it as Joe.
Right. And Mission Brazil being a perfect example of that. Those are just 5 Joes that were chosen to go for this mission to Brazil. That doesn't mean that they are now Mission Brazil sub team.
Yeah, right? They went on a mission in Brazil and changed their clothes based on the operating environment.
But was it just one mission? I know I think in the comics it was just one mission, but your own headcanon, could they have gotten stranded there and been stuck and done several missions?
Right, but to the argument, just for argument's sake and the fun of the conversation, it's Mission Brazil. It's not Sub Team Brazil.
Okay.
It just depends, right? How do you want to approach that?
No, fair enough. And also, like, I mean, I know we're talking mostly about enemy sub teams here, but when you brought up Action Force there, Chad, one thing that came to me is, what about the 4 Action Force sub teams? They could easily work their way into the Joe canon. Even the first 12 original 1982 action force, could they be their own like special overseas sub team, some sort of international sub team based on the Action Man brand,
like SAS and Z Force? Well, all 4 of them. I mean, look at Q Force. Like Q Force, that's it. Like that is their specialty.
Yeah,
that's just what they do. If you look at the SAS, I mean, they're specifically designed for that purpose. So yeah, they would be sub teams. And my Action Force shelf is just Action Force. It's all by themselves. There's no intermingling.
No,
same with my Red Shadow shelf. Like no touchy.
When I look at Q Force, I just think about how well Wetsuit, Torpedo, and the Deep Six could just fit directly into there, and also just how cool the Space Force would look surrounding the Defiant, because unless you surrounded them with Star Brigade stuff 6 years later, it would have made sense to put the Space Force on the Defiant, if you ask me. But Chad, maybe this is a question for you, but because you understand the military aspect and the nature of it, was there any overlap in theme between Night Force and the SAS, would you say they're an equivalent, or is it just the dark colors that are making me think that?
No, there's no bleed over between the British SAS and Night Force.
Yeah, so
Totally different thing. Like SAS, they're kind of like a Delta Force SWAT team. Like they're their own unique thing.
okay, so they're literally a covert operation, not necessarily at night. They're covert,
No,
which could be at night.
I mean, they're like an anti-terrorism unit. So SAS is they're really unique.
Okay.
So they're
You
multifaceted.
won't wait for the sun
but
to
they're
go
very
down to
niche.
strike.
Yeah. And then you know what? Dale has a great point. Where is it?
I'll pull it up.
Major Blood.
Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah.
Last comment.
Major Blood is a mercenary. He wears a Cobra uniform, mostly blue shirts. You know what? That's true. That's true. Huh. Anyway, I
imagine most of Cobra though, like the head guys, like the name guys. The name guys, I think, would be loyal to wherever the money is. But you've got the Vipers and the blue shirts, and they're people who believe in the cause. Those are the true Cobra ranks. Yep. Anyone else is, if they might not believe necessarily in the cause, but they believe in the money or the value or the promises to whatever they might get out of it. So less loyalty and more in it for themselves, for as long as they get something out of it. But yeah. Vipers, blue shirts, I guess. Who else have we got for the bats don't really serve anyone. They just whoever's programmed them on that specific day.
Televipers.
I was going to say, then there's like the Televipers and the Data Vipers, and they're all like communications, propaganda, all that stuff.
Yeah. Eels. Yeah, those are the Cobra guys. Yeah,
for sure.
Snow serpents. There we go. Eels and snow serpents. There you go. Right. And also, with the terrain themed ones, there was obviously some overlap, right? Like you've got not just eels, but you had hydro vipers and undertows, right?
Well, undertows were a part of the Iron Grenadiers, but I always thought
technically they were. You're right. They didn't have the colors, but you're right.
Awesome that if you wanted to be a rock viper, you had to grow a mustache. That was it. He was like, mustache if you're going to join. That's part of it. Everyone needs to have a pencil mustache. That's how you become one of the rock vipers. I guess the only real sub team for Joe's, if you think about like a separate unit that is would be Sergeant Slaughter and his Renegades, right? They're not technically a part of GI Joe, but they, Hawk could go to Sergeant and say, "Hey, I need you to infiltrate the Terradrome," and he's going to take those guys. They're not technically Joe's. I would consider them a sub team. I don't think. We've got an ex-Cobra Viper in the team already, so
yeah.
People are laughing at something in the chat. I don't know what the joke is. Maybe YouTube deleted it before it made it over to the StreamYard here.
Maybe you just said something funny, Ken, and they're laughing at you.
Or maybe they're laughing at the overweight Snoopy over at the back here. I don't know. He's had a few too many. Well, whatever. Fill in the blank.
Nothing wrong with chunky Snoopy. Leave him alone.
Oh, you know what? They're probably laughing at the mustache. Probably laughing at the idea. Wow, like my brain is thinking faster than I can actually like put thoughts on the camera right now, because everything that's been said, right? It's just right now I'm 6 years old again, and I'm sitting at home, and I've got in my own head all these sub teams surrounding the mobile command center, and saying, okay, let's attack these Joes. When it comes to other factions, though, that were added a bit later, like the Coil, never made it into the original run. But like if you got the convention Coil Troopers, or not Overkill, but Overlord, like you remember there was that convention set that had Overlord and the Coil, and then Black Major jumped in and started making like Coil Snake Armors and Coil Ninja Vipers and all that. I think that even as a later addition, and like somewhat not even canon, but like I guess you'd call it fanon edition, not as opposed to canon, they seem to just fit very seamlessly. And when I look at the Coil, it takes me a minute to remember that they were not an OG sub team.
Right.
And Chad, you said something interesting earlier about how in the Deke run, the original script had the Crimson Guards that were going to lead the coil.
It wasn't in the Deke run. It was when Sunbow was trying to continue the animated series before it was given a Deke.
Oh, okay.
It was a pitch for a continuation of the Sunbow series after the animated movie, and that's why there was that gap. So you had all the Sunbow run, then you had the animated movie, and then there was a gap with cartoons until Deke took it over.
Yeah, and then they
Sunbow tried to continue it.
Marauders and the Python Patrol, and because they'd missed that opportunity there.
Right, and Sunbow is actually it's Marvel Animation Studios, right? It was just under the Sunbow name,
right?
Yeah,
this is why I like having Chad here, because he, like you're a few years older than I am, so like you remember when it came out. So it's like I don't have the
no offense.
I said few, and those 2 years could be wisdom and experience, as opposed to like age spots and wrinkles and creaking bones and soreness and closer to. Okay, well this just went off the rails really quickly. What was I saying before?
No, it's good.
Hey, it's fine. When I hang out with the Ninja Turtles fans, like I did a few weeks ago, I was the old guy in the room. I was like, I don't remember this. I was getting out of toys by that point in time. Let's talk
I got a question for you, Ken.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I remember a time before Star Wars. So
there you go.
Get out of here. There was no such thing.
Yeah, there was. Yeah, I also remember before the internet. So go ahead.
Yeah, that I remember.
Dial-up internet and all that, and even before that. So what do you got for me, Zazel?
Yeah, so my question to you, Ken, is when you were playing Joes as a kid, did you divide them into subgroups or sub-teams like that was designed to do, or did you just pull them all together and have just one good versus evil battle?
Excellent thoughts there, because I'll tell you what, I did not have the chance to get the original Duke, given that he was an 83 release, and I think he spilled over into 84. So what happened when I saw Tiger Force Duke? Because you got to bear in mind, he was so prominent in the cartoon, right? So he was my Duke, and it didn't matter that he was wearing Tiger Force colors or that his hair was darker. Somehow he dyed it as part of, I don't know, part of the jungle camouflage or whatever. Same thing with Frostbite. I didn't have a Snowcat as a kid. I had a Tiger Cat, and that was my all-in-one Frostbite vehicle, which is funny because he's in the jungle, but he's still called Frostbite. I don't know what else you're gonna call him. Jungle Bite, Tiger Bite. I don't know.
That's his call sign, right? Call signs, they carry over no matter what.
No, that's true. That's true.
I think you made a real good point about Tiger Force. So I'm not a fan of Tiger Force, but I came in 82. But I also acknowledge that there are people who didn't get into Joe until the later years. And so that was their first hands on a Snowcat. That was their first hands on a Tiger Rat or a Rattler, right? Whichever you want to call it, and so on and so forth. This is the first time they put their hands on these vehicles.
Well,
and so to them, that's their version of it. And I respect and appreciate that.
So like to further that, like the fact that the people who play toys, they could be born anywhere from 1970 to the early 90s, right? Like there's some people like in the chat who remember Fisher Price Adventure people, right? And they were probably getting out as as Transformers ramped up or as Ninja Turtles ramped up, depending on the year, and then they just missed it. In my case, if Star Wars was not so prominent to come back as to have special editions in the 1990s, I would not have been exposed to Star Wars, right? Because when I was born in 82, right? So technically it's before Return of the Jedi. But like Star Wars quickly faded. Like by the time I'm a toddler, it's fading from stores.
Yeah,
and
85, it's gone.
Yeah, 85, it's gone. And I want to say I remember going into Toy House and seeing these and walking by those figures because I didn't care because they weren't on media at the time, right? I didn't get into GI Joe until a couple of years later, but it was all about He-Man and Transformers in that 86 era for me, right? So
you just barely squeaked in at the end of He-Man too.
Barely squeaked it at the end of He-Man, right? And speaking of people born in the 90s, right? Kayla Silva's going to do a Game of Thrones thing with me next week for the TKO. She was born in the 90s. Like she barely remembers Jurassic Park, let alone all the franchises we're talking about right now, right?
That's cool.
So, but then you catch up and you learn about all this. Like for her to go back and learn about He-Man, that's like when I go back and learn about Star Wars again, right? Like for me, introduction to Star Wars was the special editions, but I knew they were old films at the time. So to me, Phantom Menace was that much more special because I got to watch that in the theater, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Wow. Again, all the meandering thoughts has my brain going in a billion in a billion different directions.
I got two things real quick.
Take your time. We got time.
Zazel, you had an awesome point about the Renegades, and I see the Renegades as they're the flip side of the coin of the Dreadnoks.
Yeah.
So look at the number. Well, at least the original Dreadnoks, right? If you look at the number of people, right, and to include Zartan, and then to include Sergeant Slaughter, right? So it's even Steven.
Yeah.
And the other thing I had was, Ken, do you own a Ford America now?
No. I got a Ford America. I know I have a lot of memories with it as a kid. But why did I get Ford America? Why did I get the 90s version of Duke or the 90s version of Cutter? Because the ones in the Sunbow cartoon were not available for me to get.
Yeah.
So I got a lot of version 3s. Like if I could get a version 2 like a Tiger Force Duke, then great. I'd be lucky. And sorry, I'm distracted by the spam in the chat right now. Let me see if I can.
Oh wow!
It is 69
spam
girls
working on him.
XYZ. Why'd you get rid of that?
That's
Why
half
does it,
my
why
name
does it
right there.
always happen on my stream? Like I'm
It
watching
happens
you
on
folks.
mine too.
Oh,
It
does it?
happens on
Okay.
mine. Yeah,
I didn't see it happen on yours. I was gonna say, Chad, when I watched yours, when I watched your Neon at Night, I never saw it. Right? I may have seen it once on Zazel. Okay, it's all the other times. Okay. Yeah. Yes, Anthony Romo. I was quite amused by that as well. So I don't own a Ford America right now, but like I don't have memories of the flag as a kid in stores, but I did watch it in the cartoons because they were airing these cartoons through 87, 88, 89 as I ramped up and got into Joe. So that's why I got them. A lot of the Joes that I get that are the 82 to 86s that I largely missed, right? I get them because I wanted them as a kid and I was getting the 87, 88, 89 versions. And when it came back during the Deke run after, there was, what do you call it? I was getting the Deke versions because I couldn't have the Sunbow versions, even though I was watching them on VHS and renting them at the time. So I'm trying to get, so for me, collecting G.I. Joe in the 2000s was about getting the figures I couldn't have as a kid. Right.
Yeah, right.
Tony just sent you some love.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just about to read that out. So Tony, Analog Toys, and he just dropped a very interesting video about the Mattel Creations Eternia this morning. He asks me, well, first off, thank you for the super chat, and asked me, not watching UFC at the moment. You know what? I just forgot that it was on. I know I saw something in the news about it, did not realize it was today. My era for UFC, Tony, was very largely that era from The Ultimate Fighter, 2005, the Forrest Griffin era, up until about the start of Conor McGregor. So my heyday for UFC in terms of when I was watching it was basically the George St. Pierre, Anderson Silva era. And yes, I did go back and watch VHSs of Ken Shamrock and Hoist Gracie and those, but I haven't kept up with the current fighters. Like if you were to ask me who the champions are, I would kind of fumble around and guess, and I might get it right. So
you let that man come in here with $5 and completely derail our conversation to UFC.
That's because that's because I could actually talk UFC all day, and a lot of people don't know this. I think even Tony, as big a fan as he is, doesn't know that if someone was to be like, let's do a UFC stream for 2 hours, I'd be all over it. Depending on the era, because I stopped watching around 2016 or so. Though I did come back when Conor had a big fight. I'm still going on about UFC. My goodness.
Yeah.
My goodness. Stop. I mean,
okay. Of course, I'm just kidding, right? Tony's an awesome dude, and he can jump in anybody's stream and say whatever the hell he wants.
Yeah,
anyway, I'm going to get us back on track. So, 1, Duke, 83 was mail away, 84 was carded. 2, are you going to get the Tiger Force classified and kind of relive those member berries? Are you doing that?
No. I'm staying away from sub teams as far as classified is concerned, because they're bigger figures, want to save a little bit of space, want to put some budget towards other things. And Hans, if you've still got the StreamYard link, because Hans was supposed to join us, you can come in and join us for the last 15 minutes or so here.
While we talk about wrestling.
While we talk about wrestling, right? So yeah, okay.
And that's the thing about Tiger Force. Like, okay, I get it, right? We're putting out Tiger Force figures because we repainted Duke, we repainted the Ram Cycle, we have these Python Patrol figures in Classified. What is the fucking point of those teams without vehicles, right? When you Pythonize a vehicle, right, it's stealth.
Right.
So he's got the suit on, but where's the vehicle?
Chad, I think we've had this conversation before, and the way I look at it is that these are love letters to those characters that we had as a kid. We have that memory, right? So when we hold a version now of a 6-inch G.I. Joe in either Python Patrol or in Tiger Force colors, they're not designed to go with the vehicles that originally, gave us that, precious memories of playing with those subgroups that you don't even like anyway. But, those are there so we look at those, we go, yeah, I remember those. These were fun. This was, reminds me of my backyard battles. Nobody really, where would you put all of those Tiger Force vehicles anyway? You got no room left on your shelves as it is.
Where I have tons of room, my friend.
Yeah, just turn the camera.
I really don't.
But that's the way I see it. Right? I don't need to have larger scale vehicles. I had the vehicles when I was a kid. Not a lot of the Tiger Force ones, to be fair. But when you're thinking about a whale, or if you're thinking about a flag, if you couldn't do a classified flag, way too big. But I think those sort of, they harken back to those childhood memories, and I think that's where they and for Ken especially, because he grew up with Tiger Force, they're designed for him to go, yeah, I remember that. That was great. That was a good part of my my collecting habit as a kid. I might put that up on my my shelf as a statue, which is how action figures are now. They're basically just statues.
So okay, so two things. First, the best sub team ever is Megaforce, and again, there's my bike. I'm like halfway done with it.
Yeah. Why did I not see that telegraphed?
Ever.
All right.
It doesn't matter like who it is. And then the other thing is, we could dissect Classified all day. I just I try to be mature about it. I freaking hate it. I hate it.
It's okay. We forgive you. So
I'm gonna poke holes in it.
I did prep a magic trick for this stream, and because we're talking about other sub teams, I'm going to quickly pop off the stream and come back as the version 2 sub team version of myself. So just hang tight for a second. And
there better be different hair color. If he doesn't come back with
hey everybody, welcome to Toy Connection.
Oh, look at that
today. So everybody's favorite sub team and why it's the Iron Grenadiers. Let's go. Anyway,
because it's Megaforce.
Right, yeah. Megaforce for the win.
Yeah.
Hey,
Hans Chow, how are you, my man?
I'm doing good. Thank you very much, sir.
How's the wife? I hear she's not well.
I was supposed to go to a kid's birthday party.
Kids ruin birthday parties.
My wife got food poisoning, so I was the only other parent available.
How is she now? She doing better?
It's food, but see, my wife is like one of those people who's invulnerable to most diseases, but she has to pay the price, and her Achilles heel is her stomach. She can't handle anything to do with the stomach. Me, I'm more even keel across the board. She's doing all right now, but you're the vomit. She's gonna be the vomit comet for at least another 8 hours or so, as whatever bacteria she's consumed decides to leave her system. But what did you guys pick for your favorite teams?
Well, we kind of just we were all over the place. We didn't really pick a favorite, but I guess if I had to, I would pick, even though they're technically not a subgroup, but semantics aside, I would say that the Dreadnoks are probably the best eclectic group of misfits. And there, I don't think there is any one that I dislike, but as a whole, they are better together than they are the sum of their parts, in my opinion.
Yeah. If we're talking enemy team, yeah, for sure. If we're talking good guys, it's Megaforce. So
Yeah.
What is Megaforce? There's a G.I. Joe Megaforce?
No, there's not a G.I. Joe Megaforce. The Megaforce movie from the 80s, which is
Yeah,
basically G.I. Joe, right?
Right.
Eagle Force is making Megaforce figures. And yeah.
So
I'm waiting for the full-blown chat video live stream with Gazz, where he just goes through and tells everybody why Megaforce is the best ever movie of all time, as well as the best G.I. Joe. I know he did something with G.I. Joe Berg recently, but he needs his own channel, Megaforce specific, Mega Gazz.
So
Mega Gazz channel.
I've actually been working on I thought that was my door. I've actually been working on a movie series with Johnny Havoc from Simple Tricks and Nonsense and Shabir from Nudaviro 2, and we're doing a series about the best non-GI Joe movies, and it's like American Ninja, Megaforce, couple others that we've been working on slowly but surely, but they got smashed by a hurricane, right? So we had to kind of put that on pause X for a little bit. So we're gonna pick.
I wonder what other movies though can we add to that list?
We have a list, yeah. We have a list, but number one in the shoot is of course Megaforce, because like when we first started having the conversation, I was like, we're gonna do Megaforce right out of the gate.
It depends on how fantastical you want to get, right? I mean, I prefer my G.I. Joes, a little contemporary kind of military, but
But so there's specific rules, so not going to go into like World War II stuff or Vietnam stuff or like specific like these are actual conflicts, things like that.
Right.
What about the Street Fighter movie? Does that count? Because Street Fighter was part of G.I. Joe.
We didn't get
I'm going to find it.
We didn't get that.
Yeah, Commando, Predator, those are good ones. Predator, definitely.
Yeah, Predator for sure.
What about the Marines from Aliens? I think they were a good representation.
Delta Force is on that list, Matthew. Firefox is one dude. Heartbreak Ridge is an actual thing. Commando's one guy. So yes, no, yes.
What about the Marines from
Aliens? To me.
What about what?
What about the Marines from Aliens? Is that kind of? I thought they were pretty. I mean, to me, that felt like a natural evolution of where our technology is now. As opposed to some fanciful laser spewing, military organization.
No, it absolutely is. The pulse rifle is. It looks like it would be.
Also being able to be hired by a rich corporation does feel very contemporary with regards to how military works sometimes.
Yeah.
And I would on the note of course corporations and military, Iron Grenadiers. They've always been the best one to me. They've always been the swankiest. They've always been the most stylish. Their color scheme, for the most part, has been very appealing.
Oh yeah, they're great color-wise until they're not.
And then
they're all over the place.
All of a sudden, that's a wonderful purple leotard you're wearing there, sir. But I don't think that'll work on the battlefield.
The Iron Grenadiers I didn't get a lot of traction with it when I was a kid. I was kind of on my way out when Iron Grenadiers was coming up. But as an adult, when I started collecting G.I. Joe again as an adult, I really latched onto the Iron Grenadiers. Like the despoiler, all the vehicles, like as an adult, I really started to appreciate them.
They have great vehicles.
They have lovely vehicles. The Demon is one of my all-time favorite vehicles. And they
actually right behind this giant TK right there.
There's one right there.
Yeah. Right there.
There was always
Just
something.
The K out the way.
There was always, and this is perhaps romanticizing the whole thing, but when they stomped onto the scene really after Destro had kind of split up with Cobra and he went to war using the Iron Grenadiers to basically get Baroness back, that tugged on my heartstrings. I was like, that is a man there. Ladies, that's what you
I can't believe he went with Zorana in the cartoon for quite a bit. It's like, she must smell like swamp. There's no way.
Yeah, she smells like Fritos or something. She does not smell good.
Isn't she also like her brother, a little schizophrenic? Because anybody who can imitate that many people that many times, there's got to be something wrong with you. In my
Baroness do the same thing though, right?
Yeah, but she's
Yeah.
Baroness. She's already like she's European. She's confused about who she is as well. You know, they've been cut up. So.
But she
The
does it with
Cobras,
style
right? They're
and a
eccentric.
bar of soap. Yeah.
Also, you could kind of excuse a piece of her madness. Anybody who squeezes themselves into latex that tight every single day of life has probably lost some of the oxygen that's flowing to their brain in general. So, Serrana has
Ryan
no.
has a good point, saying crazy.
I feel
girls
bad
are
enough.
like,
Yeah, I feel bad enough for my wife when she puts on her her Baroness finest costume for one day. So
Right.
I don't know how the Baroness can do it.
As I said, man, lots of Vaseline and talcum powder. Just
Gets real,
the inside of,
gets real swampy in there.
the inside of Destro's helmet. That can't smell good, right? I mean, that thing never comes off.
What about Zartan's hood? You know, it's just like crazy and regret all day long.
Serrana smells like bubblegum. She does not. Only if it's on the bottom of your shoe and you've also stood in shit.
They live in a swamp. Come on.
Yeah, she does not smell like bubblegum.
Also, see, the Dreadnoks has always been one of those strange things, and because they were not contemporary military and they had no real structure aside from because I mean Zartan is the leader, but who's the second in command kind of thing. There was none. They played off very well against the other more militarized factions, and that's why I always appreciated them because they really did kind of represent that anarchy in G.I. Joe, as opposed to the other factions, which were very much military and paramilitary groups, which I think once again is. It's always nice to have a little bit of contrast. The human eye enjoys contrast.
It's true.
They also did the thing with the Dreadnoks that He-Man would do with rolling out a new enemy of the week or whatever. When you first see Trapjaw and he's such a formidable enemy, and then the next time you see him after He-Man learns how to defeat him, he's like, oh yeah, you know, he's like stupid.
I'm Trapjaw.
But the Dreadnoks, when they first introduced the Dreadnoks, remember what they were doing to those tanks? You know, they're peeling them open like cans and melting the turrets, and like their weapons were almost supernatural in that aspect. And then next time you see them, like they're trying to use these weapons on like a Vamp, and Lady J's just get out of my face, you know, and like then they're nothing. So then they're just a joke.
The jailbreak and revenge of Cobra in the Sunbow series will always go down as the first introduction of the Dreadnoks, really, to me. And I believe that it's the same concept. They were mean dudes, and they really broke into a maximum security prison for some reason in the middle of a swamp. And, you know, they took them out. And the Dreadnoks will never be my favorite team, but certainly I like them for who they are. And
Sorry.
No, go ahead. That's it.
Sunbow did a good job with a lot of the jailbreak stuff, like when Storm Shadow gets in that jail to release Spirit, and he's messing up, right? He's messing up all those green shirts and stuff.
Which episode is that?
Off the top of my head, it's season whatever, episode whatever.
Oh, I'm really glad we never got a chance to see. I'm glad we never got a chance to see Ninja Force and stuff. I think that would have really kind of cheapened the whole sub-team scenario. I'm not a ninjas guy. You know,
we did get slice and dice in Deke though, so you know.
Yeah, but before that ramped up, Deke was going off the air. Yeah.
So we flash forward to the future here, where you can have both version 1 and version 2 of a character. So that's why I've popped back on screen, because we're adult collectors now. Anyway.
I only have a couple of years on you though. It's not that much, is it? I
was saying it the other way around. I was saying that you were the version 2 of me.
Right.
Oh, did you completely miss the joke where I said I'm gonna pop off?
No, I got it. I just
I'm gonna pop off. I'm like, anyway, Jim Largo, thank you for the super chat here, asking if there's enough tough ladies in Cobra to make a female force sub team, bring on the lady villains. I think I made a comment about this. If G.I. Joe was to keep going on, I want Zazel, when you had Joe Berg, Steve, and Hooded Cobra Commander on, and I said, what about the Heroes in Heels sub-license to be the She-Ra? That's a little, to be the She-Ra to the He-Man. It's a little different from what Jim is saying, but kind of the same idea. Could they have made their own female sub-faction? I wonder.
Cobra?
Munitia.
Yeah.
Madam Armada, or whatever her name is.
Mistress
Armada.
Mistress
Mistress
Armada.
Armada. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. All right.
The-
Well,
And then you could even pull in like the female
Doctor
Strato Viper from
Yep.
the Sunbow series. That
Yep.
female officer / cadet, whatever, in that nice blue uniform. You could pull her in.
Lilith.
she was.
Yeah,
She,
and then
there was one in Worlds Without End who was always serving the Baroness. That might be who you're
Lilith.
talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. and
There
then
we go.
there's,
Nobody will forget that.
there we
there's
go.
a couple other in the modern IDW run. There's that one Crimson Guard female with the eye patch.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could get all them in there. You get like
And then
about
there's
8
the
or
Stock
10.
Commander from the Sunbow series as well. There's a lot of them, man. And then there's that
There's a lot.
crazy Crimson Guard lady who was interrogating Shipwreck in Days of Future Past, or not Days of Future Past, in that where they dyed his hair and they had him living with the
Oh, yeah, the Synthoid
like,
one.
bumps on top.
No place like Springfield. That
No,
one.
no
place
place
like
like
Springfield.
Springfield.
There
She
we
was
go.
on him shaking and was like, this was a kid's cartoon.
I know.
What?
What's the Cobra Trooper with the mask that has like a skull design on it?
Range Viper.
Range
Oh,
Viper.
Eve.
There's a
You're thinking
female.
about Eve from the Dick
Yeah,
series.
yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
That female Range Viper. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so gentlemen, we've basically come to the top of our hour of the stream here, and Zazel, we'll see if you're gonna catch some shut eye, or if you're just gonna power through the rest of the day.
You had
on
yourself
caffeine.
a 15-minute power nap just now.
Yeah, pretty much. Came back, hair was completely coiffed and everything. Snoopy was put him back in the same position because when I sleep, I gotta sleep like this, right? And Ralph on the other side, right? So
I believe it.
Wow.
I like.
there's a visual.
I like.
There's
the
a visual
Dick
for you.
cartoon. And I realized I was about to say, because I like the Dick cartoon. I realized I was about to say I like Dick, but I should
Maybe
Yeah.
think about rephrasing that.
Praise that.
yeah, phrasing. You know what I mean? Jeez.
So anyway, as we wrap up here, the links to everyone's social media outlets and portals are in the description below, so you can subscribe and follow Sergeant Slaughterhouse, as well as Articulated Chad, and check out the the mask stream they did with Jay Bartlett last night. Hans Chow does some fun and fantastic artwork. I've linked his Instagram account to the description below. Otherwise, before I log off, is there anything else you gentlemen want to say, either about sub teams or what you're working on next? I'll just open the forum up for another minute or two before we have a hard stop.
Well,
No.
I'll just say thanks for having me on. It was great to see everybody again. Chad, good to see you again. Everyone, make sure you check out Articulated Chad's channel. Give it a subscribe. Check out Hans over on Instagram. He does some amazing art. You will not be disappointed. I just figured out that there's sound attached to it, so now I can watch it with the sound. I don't know what I was doing before, but I was like, this needs sound, and apparently it had sound the whole time. Like this video. Don't forget to like this video. But yeah, after you've gone and checked out everybody else here, come and check me out. Oh, thanks, KB. Appreciate it, buddy. After you've gone and checked out everybody here, come by and check out the Slaughterhouse, and hopefully enjoy this day. Tomorrow, well, it'll be today for me. Tomorrow for you guys, Treasures for Trigger is having its first premiere.
Yes.
So be sure to check that out, because it's going to be a doozy.
Yes, Treasures for Trigger is if you look at my featured channels on my channel tab, you'll see his channel there. Excellent channel, very not underrated to us, but underrated in general in terms of where we think his channel can go in the future.
Yeah, Phil's rad.
Yeah. And sorry, before we've got a question from one of the channel members here, KB, and actually he's our newest channel member. He's asked if I have ever gotten Half the Battle Timber on a stream. I do follow him on Facebook, but I don't. I've never thought to get him on a stream before. I've never actually. I don't know if he does live streams. I know he's been in Cobra Convergence a lot, but I've not thought to ask him on a stream yet. But otherwise, thanks everyone for the great comments today. Thanks to our guests on the stream today. You gentlemen are welcome. You got an open door policy with me anytime. And yo, Joe, keep having fun. And we'll see you all again soon. Take care.
Okay, bye.
And have a good one.